Welcome back, everyone. Well, I have a brand new HO scale kit out called Jenkins Plastics. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to put that together. Now, the kit is currently available on my website. And as most of you have already heard, I am going to be doing N scale. So this kit will also be available in N scale. Now, getting into N scale is very exciting. You're going to be seeing videos from me on it. I'm even going to start an N scale layout. It's small, it's U-shaped, and it's going to be a shelf layout. And it's located in another room here in my basement. All right, we have a lot to do today, so let's get to it. Don't forget, all Patreon members receive a discount on all kits. And the discount code can be found on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jason Jensen Trains. Okay, we're going to start with the main building. So it should be marked A and B. And I'll show you here. Here is what the whole building will look like. And again, we're working with A and B. And you can see on the back, it's just one wall. So here is our back wall. And then here is A that gets glued on the front. And this is B, and this is the front. And you'll see it has two squares engraved on it. And then we have this one, which gets glued on the side. And then this one with two windows gets glued on the side over here, like that. And then this one gets glued right there. So those are the walls that we'll be using. And I forgot to knock out that little piece. And then that just slides in there. Now, what you're going to want to do is take the pieces, and where you cut it, here's a great example. I just cut out this little piece, and you'll see it leaves a little tab. You want to get rid of that on all the pieces. So just take a little file and really quick, go over the pieces. It's basically thick cardboard, so it files down instantly. Be careful that you don't press too hard. You'll make a groove in it. So just go over and knock off all those little nubs, even in your windows. Okay, the next thing, I went and did that to all the pieces. Next, we're going to spray a gray primer on both sides of these pieces. Okay, I sprayed a gray primer on both sides. I then sprayed a reddish brown primer on all of the doors and windows. Okay, let's take a pencil and put an X on the inside of the walls. So that's the outside. The outside has the squares engraved. So put an X on the inside. It's thinner at the bottom and thicker at the top. So I'm putting my X at the bottom. Oh, that's the front, yeah. And here is the side wall. It doesn't matter, either side, you can put an X on. This one, this is a side wall, but it's the interior. It goes right in the middle. And there's a little slit, and that goes towards the front. Let's start to glue our walls together. And if some are bowed, I don't know if you can see that, just kind of bend it the opposite direction. So make sure all your walls are straight. It doesn't take much. Okay, we're going to start with the wall in the center. So we're going to take our back wall and take this wall here, and it goes just like that. So it has, there's a door that'll go right there, and then it has that little slit at the bottom. Now it's very, very important that this is all square. So, very important to use these, or something that's square. Keep pressing it together, and that glue seeps out, and then just wipe it. Now you can glue it like that. I've got my block there. It's very important that it's square and that you don't see any gap in between the pieces. The reason it's so important is that there's a trim that gets glued on these, and that trim won't fit if this part's not done right. Now, if there's a little, I want to show you this little gap. Can you see that gap? Right there. Okay, you can see that gap is gone. It's nice and tight. Okay, now let's take the front wall. That's the one with the two squares engraved. That goes right there. And this will all be in the instructions. I don't write the instructions until I've built it. So I have no instructions to follow. Now, if you want, you can take a dab of super glue . Turn this so that you can see it. You don't want to be in a hurry when you're doing this part, when you're doing the main walls. You want to make sure that everything is pressed together nice and tight and there's no gaps. Okay, now we'll take the sidewall. Again, make sure it's nice and flat. Now the sidewall has 2 windows at the top. Now it's okay if you go a little heavy with the glue on this, because it just sort of oozes out in between the pieces and then you can just wipe it off. And it sort of seals that crack. If you have little clamps, that works great. I do have some clamps. Let me see if I can grab them quick. Now, very gently. You don't want to damage it. Check all the seams before it dries to make sure that everything is nice and smooth. And there's no gaps. Making sure that everything is square. I know I sound like a broken record, but make sure that there's no gaps. You might just have to hold it or put a clamp on it. And everything is nice and square. Okay, I've cut out all of the trim or molding that goes on here. I'll show you. And these are all marked either A or B, because remember, the long part is A, and then the tall one is B. And there'll be a full diagram in the instructions for you. Now take your file and make sure that everything's nice and smooth. You don't want any of those little nubs showing up on there. You can use a what's it called? An emery board for fingernails. That works great. Okay, those are done. Now we can get a gray primer on these, and I also did the roof trim. Now again, these will be marked A and B, and these go along the top of the roof. So A only has 3 sides, and then B will have 4. And these will be marked. Real quick, I also cut out these. And again, you'll have a group that is B, and you'll have a group that's A. And these eventually will get glued around the top edge. Now, if you do get them confused, again, there'll be a diagram, a drawing in the instructions with the letters on all the pieces. Okay, I've got 3 of the pieces. We're going to start with the ends, or the side pieces. So we're going to cover this side, and this side. We'll start right here. Now it goes all the way to the edge, so it'll be flush on the edge, but notice it sticks up on the back side. And that's normal. That's how they all will be. Now we can use a brush. Let me see. I'm just going to clean a brush here quick. Okay, so take the glue and make sure that it's spread evenly on the piece. Everything is covered. And press it down good and tight. Take a dry, clean brush and wipe away that extra glue. You don't want any extra glue coming out the back because there's a roof card that gets glued on top of there. So make sure that's nice and clean. Okay, now we'll take this one. Now only half of the top needs to be covered in glue. The sides need to be completely covered. By tapping it, it just spreads the glue out. Or you can use a brush and spread it out. So we're going to line up this edge, making sure that that's flush. Same on this side, make sure that's flush. Now the reason I say to make sure that it's all covered with glue is that if it's not, say if that little bottom piece doesn't have glue on it, it'll tend to curl. Any area that doesn't have glue, it's either going to curl up or bow a little bit because this is paper. Okay, now this piece, and you can see that it's as wide as the wall. It goes all the way to the edge. Okay, it's completely covered except for the top half there. Make sure your sides are flush and that it's flush at the bottom. Then if any extra glue seeps out, now we can do the back. Now this one you're going to want to kind of work fast because that glue will start to dry. Make sure it's flush on the end. Make sure it's flush on this end. Make sure it's flush right there. Now don't worry if you get glue on here because we're going to take a sponge and we're going to sponge paint all of this. Okay, now we're going to take this piece and glue it on the front right there. And we'll spread the glue so that it's completely covered. You know, another reason we want that glue completely covering the piece is that we want it to completely glue. We don't want any areas that are lifted because we want to give the illusion that it's all one thing, that it's all either concrete or stucco. Now, if you want to, where two pieces join that corner, if you want it to look more solid, just take your glue, run a bead down, and then very lightly run your finger over it. And you always want to test fit pieces before you glue them to make sure that it's the correct one. I'm really pressing that down. And then you can see, hopefully you can see that, where the glue is sort of seeping out. Then just take your finger, very lightly, just drag it down. This side has a little bit of a gap. So I'm just going to take my glue and run it down. Okay, let's set that aside. And let's get all of our trim that goes around the top. And I'm going to quick wash all this glue, dried glue, off of my fingers. Okay, now we're going to do the decorative trim that goes along the top. So there's 3 pieces. Those will be marked A. And we want to start with the shortest one that goes on the end. And it'll be flush on both sides. Now you want to dab it so that there's not too much, because you don't want that glue to seep out and fill in that little decorative trim at the bottom. So again, it's flush on the ends and flush on the top. Just keep pressing it until it starts to set up. So again, flush on the top and then flush on the ends. Now this piece, I had the wrong ones. Always, that's why I say always dry fit your pieces before you put glue on it to make sure that's the right one. I had grabbed the wrong one, which was probably, yeah, that goes on the side there. So these 2 long ones, and again, in the instructions or on the diagram, it'll be marked A. So line up the corner on the end so that it's flush. Make sure your top is flush. And just keep squeezing that together. And you'll see the glue sort of seeps out in that crack at the top. Then just take your finger and wipe it. And you might have to do it again. Just keep pressing it together. Okay, now I'll go ahead and do the top of this. I wanted to point out that you should glue the sides on first, and they are flush on the side. So you can see that it's the same exact length as the side. And if it's not quite smooth on the side, just take your file and smooth it out a little bit. Now, these pieces should go all the way to the edge. So I'll probably mark these in the instructions as like, this is B, so this is B front. Just keep pressing that together until all that glue seeps out, and then wipe it. Now you want that flush because we have our I moved them, but there's trim that goes across the top, and that'll sit flat on there. This is not a difficult kit. It's important though that everything is flush and all the corners are tight fitting, which really should be done with every kit that you build. Okay, all of our trim is done. Okay, next we're going to build this tower, and it is C. So all of these parts are labeled C. Pretty easy. It's just like the last one. The first thing I did was cut the pieces out, then took my file and filed all the little nubs off. Then sprayed a primer on both sides, and now we'll just put it together. Probably don't really need to show this, but on this one you do want to make sure that you put your blank side right here. Just like before, make sure that everything fits good and tight. Okay, our structure is glued together. Now we'll do these pieces. And like before, we're going to start with the sides, because the sides are flush. They go all the way to the edge. You know, if you wanted to, if you're building this at home, you can start with this structure right here, just to give you an idea of, or a feel of, working with this material. Just cleaning up any extra glue. Right, now we'll do the other side, the opposite side. Okay, now we'll quick do the decorative trim that goes around the top. And again, start with the sides. And it goes flush to the ends. And then flush with the top. I almost forgot that it gets trim around the top. Again, all this trim will be marked C. Now, if you don't want to see that little pattern in the corners, just fill it in with glue. I would wait until this was completely dry, then fill that in. You could either fill it in with Elmer's glue or fill it in with acrylic paint. Just put it on real thick and then just brush it over once to smooth it out. I don't know if you can see the pattern in that corner. So this is completely dry. Now, if we built this correct, these should just drop in there. We don't want to glue them yet because we have to put the windows in. This one, I noticed I made that a little too long. So all we have to do I may shorten that in the kit so that you don't have to cut this. But all I did was notch that corner. Now you could spray paint these cards flat black and then put them in here. Okay, so that's basically what it's going to look like. Now there's a little structure that we have to build that goes in between there, and then we have a bump out over here. Now on the website, I'm offering this add-on structure separately. And if you want to make this taller, you can. Let me take the camera off and show you what this looks like. Okay, this part is going to take a little while, but I'm going to paint all of this with a chalk paint called Castle. It's from Folk Art, and again, it's chalk paint. And I'm going to use a sponge because I want to give it texture. And then I'll probably go lighter with the Castle color towards the bottom, like the paint is chipping off all towards the bottom of the structure. Okay, so I'm taking my sponge, very little at the bottom, heavier at the top. And then as you can see, you can't get into all of the little nooks and crannies. So you take a brush, an old beat up brush works the best because you want that pattern. Okay, the red on the bottom is French wine. Okay, I just made a wash. I just used bittersweet chocolate and a lot of water. Okay, next we're going to spray a gray primer on this piece. And then we're going to paint all of these gray, and all of these pieces get put underneath the windows. Okay, I have these 4 done. And I have 2 above the doors. Okay, I have all of our little windowsills glued on. Next, I'm going to take slate gray. That's what color I painted them to begin with. This way, if there's a little line there between the piece we glued on and the wall, the paint fills it in and makes it look like one solid piece. Okay, I'll finish up all the windows, and then we'll start to put acetate behind these and get these glued in. While you've got your slate gray out, if you want to, you can do some slight dry brushing and just sort of hit some of the edges. If you want to hit some of the edges of the windows, it's subtle, but it gives it a nice little highlight. Let's take a break from the structure for a little bit, and let's work on our 2 wood structures that we got to build. So first we're going to cut out all of our pieces. If you can't find where the tabs are, it's easier to see them from the back. Okay, now we can brace all these. Okay, I'll quick go over the bracing with you. On these two, I went all the way to the edge on both sides. These two, all the way to the edge on both sides. Now on this one, I came in 1/8 on both sides. The bracing does run into that hole there, but there's a vent that gets put there, so it'll get covered. And then same on these two. I came in 1/8 of an inch on both ends and put the bracing. Okay, we're going to stain these using aged barnwood. And the stain is from besttrains.com. Okay, seeing this on the wood, there's not much of a contrast. I think I'm going to let this dry and then go over it with another color. Okay, I'm going to go over these walls using raw umber. This will give it a little bit more of a contrast. Don't forget to stain your corner trim. Okay, I've cut out the two small frames and the two windows. First, let's glue on our frames, brushing off any extra glue. Now, we'll take our small windows and glue them to the acetate. Now we'll give that a second to dry, then we'll cut those out and pop them in there. I guess while we're waiting for that, we can cut one of our vents, these right here. I'm going to cut them both out. One of them gets glued. You'll see there's a square that's engraved on there. So we'll paint that square black and then put that right there. There's some bracing in there, and I was going to paint it black, but I think I'll just cut it. Now that our wall is stained, we really don't need that bracing. Okay, let's cut our windows out. Now I cut them bigger than the window. That way we can just simply glue it from the back side. I don't want to lose that vent, so let's quick paint that square black and get that glued on. I'm using the lines on my mat to make sure it's square. I want to make sure it's perfectly square. Sorry, I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. I'm going to put something on the inside so that door has something to glue to and it doesn't fall through. So take a piece of cardboard, any cardboard like from a cereal box. Now we just take our door Okay, now let's get the corner trim that we stained cut and put on the corners. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and glue this onto the roof, and I'm going to center it. The window faces forward, but the structure is going to sit right up against that, and I'm going to center it between this door and this pillar or column. You can mark it first with a pencil if you want to. Then we'll get our roof card glued on there. And then this gets put right there. It'll go all the way against the back raised edge. And then up against that wood structure. We'll wait to glue that on until we get our windows put in. I got in a little bit of a hurry, and I had to go back and paint the inside edge of that window. So before you glue your doors and windows and vent in, I just grabbed a scrap piece off my workbench. Take your trim color, your brown, and paint the inside. Paint the inside of the opening. That way when you glue your window in from the back and you put your trim around, it all looks like one thing. Now again, I want to point out that I did not glue any of the roof cards in. So now when we put in our windows, it'll be a lot easier. Obviously this one I did glue in. I glued the roof card on there. We'll take some black construction paper and make it look like tar paper. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just kind of excited to get that on there, and I don't think it's really gonna affect getting these windows in here. So let's get this glued on. You know, I didn't, man, I should have made that a little longer. There's not much to glue to. You can see where the boards, these walls, glue right to the edge of those columns. Okay, then we have our roof card, and you'll see that it has notches cut. I'll glue that in there and then show it to you. Okay, I've got all of my windows glued onto my acetate, and you can see where I glued them right to the edge so that the top part is clear, because the little windows here and here fit inside those. Now on the tall windows, we're going to leave a little bit of the acetate around the edge. So we're actually going to cut it bigger than the window. I'll show you on this first one. So that way, when we glue it in, it doesn't fall through. Now on all these little ones, we have to cut them the same exact size as the frame. So just run your blade right along the edge. Alright, let me get all these cut out and then we'll start to get those put in. Okay, real quick before we get our windows glued in, we're going to make it look like some of the windows are patched. In a lot of old factories you'll see where there's different squares in the windows that are lighter or a different color and they're patched. So we'll just quick on the back side, it'll definitely show up better once the windows are glued in. Okay, next we're going to weather this using different colored pigments and really dirty it up. Put dirt along the bottom, in the corners and cracks. Add lots of dirt, and that's why I say wait to glue in your little windows, especially if you want them open. Because if they're open and they're sticking out and you're handling it, you're going to break those off. Same with your doors. If you want your doors to be slightly opened, wait to glue them in after you've weathered everything. Because again, we'll be handling it and churning it, and you'll end up breaking stuff off if it's sticking out. Okay, let's start with kind of a dark brown, a winter soil. Alright, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down a paper towel. Okay, I've finished all of the brown. Now I'm going to move on to black. But be very careful if you're using black at home. Very little of this. Maybe just towards the bottom. Okay, now I'll focus on the bottom of this. It's nice having the paper towel taped down in front of you, because any loose stuff you can pick up with your brush and sort of brush it on, even if there's brown. Now, some advice: you don't want to handle it down here with your fingers, because if you get some on your fingers and then you handle it up here at the top, you're going to smudge some of that maybe where you don't want it to be. Okay, let's get rid of this. Okay, now we'll get this glued on there. Now, I was going to put some tar paper on here with black construction paper, but really there's no need to. I just used some of the pigments on it, dirtied it up. Same with the rest of the roof cards. It's spray painted a charcoal gray. You could do black. Let's see. Let's get the glue. Now, if you're new to the channel, the reason I tap the glue is to spread it out so you don't have any large clumps on there that ooze out when you put it on this structure. And as you go over it, you'll feel that it starts to get tacky. It starts to get real sticky doing this. Now it does dry clear, but if you see a little bit, you can definitely brush it away. Okay, next we're going to take all of these little windows and glue them on. I'm going to put mine at an angle so that they're open, but we'll glue them to the top. Okay, before we do the windows, I'm going to get a gray primer sprayed on these detail parts and let those, while they're drying, we can start to glue our windows in. These are the detail parts, and there's 2 of them. And there's little squares engraved on the front, and one goes there. Hopefully I'm on camera. One goes there and one goes there. So we'll get a gray primer sprayed on these, and then we'll add some rust to them. I am going to take a file and file the back of them so they're nice and flat. Okay, so we'll pick up a window, put our tweezers on it, we have to hold it there for a little bit, let that glue set up. You'll notice I'm dabbing the glue on the cardboard first, because sometimes a lot will come out all at once, and you don't want that to happen on the window. Alright, I'll go ahead and do the rest, and I'll glue on the doors too. I'm going to have them slightly opened. I wanted to quick mention that you should do the bottom ones first and then the top ones, so that you don't accidentally break anything. And yes, you waste just a little bit of glue by dabbing it first, but I'd rather waste a little bit of glue than wreck my windows by putting too much glue on it. Now, I've been using super glue on this project, but you could use Eileen's tacky glue. I've gotten really used to using super glue. I'm real comfortable with it, and it dries really fast. So, okay, all of our windows are done. Man, this has been such a fun kit, and I think because it's a nice break from working with wood. Most of the structures are wood kits, so this has been really nice. Now I've got my little details. I put a primer, and then I quick put a wash of bittersweet chocolate. The engraved square is a little bit smaller than the detail part, so keep that in mind when you're gluing these on. I forgot to add our little door up there. So what I'm going to do is cut a door that's slightly bigger. So I'll lay it on here, line up the bottom, make sure the bottom is even with it. This would be a lot easier if none of that was on the roof. But that's okay. Now we'll put glue around the edge. Make sure that they didn't curl with the with painting them and gluing them together. Make sure they're nice and straight. Again, it's safe to first dab it on cardboard or a paper towel so a whole bunch doesn't come out all at once. Sometimes there's a little bubble that comes out, and so it puts a lot on there. I'm sure if you used it, you know what I'm talking about. Now again, be very careful handling it, since we have our windows that are open and our detail parts on here. We don't want anything to break off. Okay, this is where we're at so far. So you have your main structure, and then you have your add-on structure, which is sold separately, and that can simply go on top. It can go next to it to make it longer. It can go on this side. Now, depending on where you put that, if you get it at all, will play a huge role in where you put your signs and your smokestacks. Okay, let's build our signs. So we have this one and a long one. And here are the supports. So in the kit, you get a 9-inch piece of black tubing. Cut it in half. Then the ends go down. Okay? Then we cut all of our pieces out of this sheet. You want to take this piece right here, and slide that down. Then we have regular rings that we slide down. Then we have another one of these. Now you want to space your rings however you want them. Just use your lines or a ruler to space them out. Just keep moving them around until you're happy with the spacing. Okay, then we'll just take a small drop of super glue. Okay, we'll let that sit and dry. Very carefully, we're going to move it. Want to make sure it's level at the bottom. All right, now we're going to move on to our big sign. Now you'll notice everything, I just sprayed a gray primer on both sides and then cut everything out. Okay, so you have three of these. We'll start with the one in the center. And you just want to make sure that the top of this is flush with the top of the sign. Now set it on there first and make sure you've got the right, make sure it's going the right direction. Now if you've lined those all up at the top, it should sit level. And it does. Okay, now let's make the long sign. It has 4 supports. So we'll do one on each end. So it's the end, you skip one, the next one, skip one, the next one, skip one, and the end. I'll show you once I get these glued on. Okay, I'm going to take the camera off again and show you different ways that you can put your signs and smokestacks. Well, as you can see, this is a pretty large kit. You can see over here, there is the winery kit, which was pretty large. And so you can kind of see the comparison between the two. That was such a fun build. Like I said in the video, I enjoyed building this because it wasn't wood. And I've just been building wood kits for so long that it was a nice break to build this. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. And like always, a huge, huge thank you to all of my Patreons. You guys are the best. This channel is not possible without the help of all these people. All right, well, until next time, stay motivated and happy modeling, everyone. And don't forget, this kit is currently available on my website at jasonjensentrains.com.